Hello, and welcome back to this part of the Mobile Suit Gundam retrospective on mobile suit development. Um, I forgot which part this is, but I think right after this we just finished the Project V machines, which was starting here. For our next part, we'll be focusing on the ground war of the 1 Year War, from the beginning of the White Base's return to space. Well, less following a timeline focus, but more on focusing on the mobile suits used and the mobile suits used in the ground battles before and after and during the 1 Year War, the phase of the 1 Year War, where ground warfare was utilized. So, the main events that we'll be focusing in this part of this presentation is Earth drop operations, ground mobile suit combat, and vague lore happenings that will impact global mobile suit development in the Earth sphere. So, for the next slide is the Earth drop operations. This is Zeon's main combat operation plan for global conquest on a wide level. Basically, seizing the opportunity to decapitate all of the Earth Federation's military power on their homeland as to force force a cessation of the war and bring and hopefully make the Earth Federation surrender to the Zeon forces. This it's basically the same political objectives that the Operation British earlier that we talked about in the first part, the colony drop, a radical military operation against the Earth Federation in order to force them to surrender and recognize the independence of the Principality of Zeon. So, for the main summary of this is after the implementation of the Antarctic Treaty, Zeon would see its strategic options limited with the restriction on the usage of nuclear weapons, weapons of mass destruction, biological weapons, and most main bad things that you'd use as a war crime in most wars was outright banned. This left Zeon with unfortunately with a lot of strategic options to force the Federation's hand permanently. Since Zeon neither had the resources nor the manpower to face the Federation one on one, as the Earth Federation had an entire planet of resources and manpower to pull from. What that left Zeon to do, it left one strategic plan that left them that was left on the table. Take over Earth, or less take over or have a conquest of Earth, but take off important resource areas of Earth in order to deny important and vital manpower and resources that the Federation could exploit for their war effort. The main areas that these Earth drop operations would be focused on several main continents, from Central Asia, North America, Oceania, and North Africa. All these main operations would be centralized areas where Zeon would drop their ground forces at in order to start an offensive against the Earth Federation. The main and first objective was capture strategic resource outposts and areas of vital importance to the Federation in order for the use of Zeon to further their own campaign of war, deny the enemy resources, and feast yourself on those resources. The main supply objective that was key and vital for the success of these Earth drop operations, as well for future ground and as well as future ground combat for Zeon to further their hold on Earth, was Odessa. Now, Odessa was a major supply and command outpost for Zeon in the coming months of the 1 Year War. When Zeon captured Odessa was already a major supply depot for the Federation. But when Zeon captured Odessa, became the center point of Zeon operations on Earth, slowly becoming a major supply and command outpost, with the mines in Odessa and the resources available there being shipped to the space forces back in the colonies in space, as well as the various fronts on Earth. To say that Odessa was important was an understatement. Odessa held the key resources and command center for Zeon to hold the war in their hands. This would with Odessa in Zeon hands, Zeon resistance and forces would slowly but surely occupy vast swaths of Earth, denying resources and manpower and land for the Federation to exploit. This would leave the Federation in a hard position, with various major military bases and headquarters being sieged by Zeon forces. This would force the Federation to stubbornly fight them. Even with the Zeon's major economic boost with the capture of Odessa as a major command outpost on Earth, the Federation is still a bigger national entity with a lot more manpower to pull from, as well as just a bigger economy to pull from. The Federation could still fight them on a standstill, even though they didn't have their own mobile suits to fight the Principality of Zeon against. This vastly bigger economy forced the Federation to take a war doctrine that was, well, not popular with the forces or the army that the Federation had. It was by throwing soldiers, men, and battle groups at the enemy until they slowed down. Most Federation combat campaigns in these early parts of the war, during the stalemate, the months of hell for the Federation, would see would see millions and thousands of soldiers killed in the front lines, with various tanks, conventional aircraft, conventional landcraft being used against the superior mobile suits that were being, well, that were being outfitted and sent and fought against, so that the Principality of Zeon were using. It was, well, a massacre. Zeon mobile suits vastly outclassed most Federation conventional weaponry, vehicles, and, well, their entire arsenal. But even though with this vastly outclassing, a single Zaku mobile suit can take down dozens of tanks, an entire regiment of aircraft, it still means nothing if the Federation still keeps throwing out several dozen regiments and several hundred tanks at a single Zaku. It does it it doesn't mean much. Good quality doesn't it will still fall in vast quantities. Thus, this left the war into a stalemate between the Federation and the Principality of Zeon, with Earth forces slowly being deprived of manpower and resources, and being slowly forced into a war of attrition. It was only a matter of time before either the Federation lost morale and the resources to commit to this giant war of attrition, or if the Principality of Zeon would lose their resources in their war of attrition. This stalemate would last for months, with millions of deaths on each side. But with the introduction of Project V machines into the Federation's arsenal, it meant one thing, and meant a very massive change to the state of war, a breaking of the stalemate. Earth combat operations would then severely change, and the reality of global conquest on a massive scale to the Principality of Zeon would slowly show its cracks. The reality of these combat operations and Earth combat operations as a whole, that the Principality of Zeon was undertaking, was that these operations were massively resource intensive. They need both time and manpower, which Zeon didn't have. They had resources aplenty from their asteroid mining outposts in the asteroid belt, as well as their main resource outpost of Odessa. But the manpower needed to pilot the mobile suits, their tanks, their conventional infantry, they were losing and hemorrhaging lives fast. Zeon's budget had already been strained with the several research and development projects that they were putting their funding into, with the development of new mobile suits, new weapons, anything to get an advantage over the Federation's vast quantities of conventional weaponry. This this forced the operations of several groups in the cooperation areas of Central Africa, Asia, North America, Oceania, and Africa to have a severe flaws in their campaigns, heavy resistance in the massive quantities of conventional weaponry, as well as a lack of air support with conventional aircraft the Federation the Federation serviced, outclassing most of the fighters that the Principality of Zeon had, vastly because the Principality of Zeon never had to develop aircraft on the planet side. The Federation had several generations of experience in developing aircraft for gravity-based operations. And the Principality of Zeon didn't. They were vastly outclassed in the aerial theater. And even though their ground units could easily swat those aerial units out of the sky, i.e. the Zaku, it didn't mean much if your Zaku was being bombed by several different fucking aircraft. So, with the lack of actual air support, Zeon's supply lines would slowly be strained and collapse. Every front being forced to deploy mobile suits that were either outdated, machinery that were out of repair or out of service, slowly showing a degradation in maintenance and quality that the units of the front line that the Principality of Zeon could not afford, forcing the collapse of the front, slowly showing defeats for the Principality of Zeon's fronts, even more so with the introduction of Federation mobile suits. Zeon's ground units, then, their mobile suit units would reflect this reality. With Earth drop operations commencing, combat had seen that that Zeon's Zaku 2 wasn't up to the job. Earth's various environments, its gravity, the jungles, the various biomes, mobile suits needed to adapt to those changes, and mobile suits were developed out in space. And while they were already sturdy, rigorous machines, they needed better mobile suits for ground combat. So in order to better adapt, Zeon High Command submitted a design competition between Zeonic and Zamad to develop better ground use mobile suits, as well as their own in-house development to develop better ground use mobile suits, both taking feedback from pilots on the ground as well as considerations to the various environments. This design competition, as well as modification packages to existing MS, would see the improvement of ground mobile suits deployed on Earth by various degrees, and came out with marginal success in the early months of the stalemate. These mobile suits would be the MS-07B, the Goof. This would be one of the various earliest mobile suits that would be developed for ground use combat. These things would be developed in concerns to the feedback that pilots on Earth were having about how their Zakus weren't agile enough, didn't have the mobility they needed, the weaponry, the armory. The Goof took the basic frame of the Zaku 2 and modified it heavily for ground usage. This thing had finger guns. I'm not joking. It does have finger guns. Look at the design, as well as a heat sword in considerations for Federation mobile suits if they ever get developed. A shield. This mobile suit, since it was based on the Zaku 2 frame, it was very, very easily modifiable, allowed for easy customization for ace pilots. But this thing would slowly become out of date during the later phases of the ground war. In the later phases of the ground war, of the ground war on Earth. But this thing would be Zeon's first step into developing actual ground purpose combat mobile suits for the Earth combat operations. These things would be vital would be vital on the front lines, and was a morale booster and absolute and thing and mobile suit was a morale booster and just mobile suits that held front lines by themselves, and squad commanders loved them. Squads loved them. These were good mobile suits of the time, but slowly grew outdated when technology grew past them. The next mobile suit that was developed for ground usage was the MS-09 Dom. This thing was developed by Zimad as an answer to the design competition that the Zeon High Command submitted. This thing would use high power nuclear pulse thrusters on its legs to hover across the ground, as well with its heavy frame being able to carry heavy weapons, as well as a heat saber, same idea as the heat sword, and would use those weapons in a highly agile, heavily and highly destructive play um, um, play style, attack style, doctrine. Yes, they would use their high agility as well as their heavy weapon bazookas in highly destructive doctrine use, with the MS-09 Dom being mainly used for like hit and run tactics or main base destruction. These guys were heavily armored, highly mobile, and highly destructive with their loadouts. This thing was basically took the took the idea of ground use mobile suits. Zamad's main philosophy and ethos was that on Earth, Zeon mobile suits such as the Zaku 2 were still kind of too lightly armored, and even were still too lightly armored. Even though the Zaku 2 is like heavily armored compared to most space fighter designs, it still couldn't tank like a tank shell. I don't think most things won't be able to tank a tank shell. You'd die if you got a tank shell. Like, that's just normal. And so Zamad's idea was, okay, what if we made mobile suits highly agile so they can dodge enemy fire, as well even if they do get hit, it'll bounce off of the armor. Another inclusion of the Dom would be the inclusion of a scattering beam particle cannon. This thing would be used would this thing was designed to be used as a highly destructive beam mega particle weapon on a mobile suit. Um, but with with failures due to the power constraints, as well as just not lacking the technology for ECAPs, the scattering mega particle cannon was very weak and was mainly used as a blinding weapon for close range combat. So it wasn't that good, but they mainly added this as a feature in response to the deployment of the RX-78-2 Gundam that Amuro was deployed with in this era of the war. It did not help. The next ground mobile suit that I'll be touching upon for Zeon is the Zigok. This is one of the most advanced amphibious mobile suits, and you're probably wondering why I'm only touching upon why am I only touching upon the most advanced amphibious mobile suits? Well, quite frankly, amphibious mobile suits in and of themselves have an entire separate design tree in relation to ground mobile suit operations, with Zeon High Command thinking that since Earth is 70% of oceans, we should make mobile suits that can fight on the oceans, right? Nevertheless, it didn't pan out as well as Zeon High Command thought, because naval vessels were not the main battlefield that Earth combat operations would be faced upon, but actually land. So it didn't pan out. But the main reason that I do put the Zigok here is that amphibious mobile suits are very important to Gundam, and well, I needed to at least put one. So for this one, I'll put the culmination of all one-year war amphibious mobile suit technology here, the Zigok. The Zigok was developed as one of the later stage was developed in the later stages of the 1 Year War, such as the Dom. The Dom, while the while the Goof was developed early on in the ground phase of the 1 Year War, and the 1 Year War, the Dom and the Zagok were developed really later in the the ground phase of the 1 Year War, around the time when the around the time when the war was slowly and steadily being going back onto a space theater. So these things were developed as Zeon's the Dom and the Zagok were developed around the time when Zeon needed high quality mobile suits fast in order to solidify their hold on Earth. The Zagok was developed as an amphibious mobile suit in order to assault Jabro, the main military headquarters of the Earth Federation. You probably think, oh, Jabro sounds familiar. Jabro is, I think I mentioned Jabro on Operation British. Operation British is intended colony drop target was Jabro in order to disorganize the military organization of the Earth Federation. Well, that failed. Um, well, that failed. So, yeah. But the Zigok was mainly designed for an assault on Jabro headquarters itself, with the location of Jabro being located during the war. During the war, Zeon would develop these mobile suits in order to assault the head military headquarters of the Federation. These things would be fitted with mega particle cannons in their claws. The little holes you see in the middle of their claws, those things are actually mega particle cannons. These things are basically one of the first times you see actual viable mega particle weaponry on a mobile suit, aside from the Gundam. These things would be developed. These things would be developed in response to the Gundam. Actually, mega particle weaponry. Mega particle weaponry actually um, also has an issue with cooling on mobile suits as well, which is another design feat. Has a problem with cooling, but with cooling, since power generation, you need to generate a lot of power that generates a lot of heat, and you need to cool that heat. While the Gundam solves that using ECAPs, the MSM-07 Zigok actually solves this since it's amphibious mobile suits. Amphibious mobile suits need to intake a lot of water since they have to function underwater. So the design philosophy I think Zeonic used in developing the Zagok was that using the water ballast that they have inside the mobile suit in order for it to sink underwater, they would use the water inside those ballasts to cool the reactor in order to generate enough Minovsky particles and energy to generate the highly energy intensive megaparticle beams, which was kind of genius for the time. And if the Federation didn't develop ECAP technology, I'm pretty sure that this kind of cooling solution would be used far more in the development of megaparticle weaponry in the future, with megaparticle weaponry being utilized far more often than beam weaponry. But alas, this thing was developed too late, too little, and well, it never got progressed past that point. It's a neat little feature of what if mega particle weaponry was on mobile suits instead of beam weaponry. And so that leads us to the Federation's ground units. Federation's ground units. I think I'll save this for another time. These next up is the Federation's ground units, as well as the end of the ground war of the 1 Year War. But unfortunately, we'll end this here, right where we'll end this here, finishing off all of the main important ground units that were used in the Principality of Zeon's fight for the ground war. This part contained a lot of history, I know, but like, it's important. This thing included a lot more history. But thank you for watching. Hopefully, when you watch this video, I'll have edited it. You'll have clips of the mobile suits fighting, and you'll see clips of all of that in the background. You won't just be looking at the slideshow. Thank you for watching. I also have the audio synced up, so yay. Bye.